Hello history buffs, time travelers, and scholars. The Viking Age, lasting from around the late 700s to the early 1000s, is one of the most interesting and often misunderstood times in history. The Vikings, famous for their skill at sea, raiding, and exploring, also followed traditions that were both surprising and essential to their way of life. The Wild Warriors. The Viking berserkers were warriors known for their terrifying battle rage and incredible strength. More than just soldiers, berserkers represented a unique mix of intense physical power and mysticism. The word berserker likely comes from the Old Norse words ber, meaning bear, and surker, meaning shirt, hinting that these warriors either wore bearskins into battle or aimed to fight with the fierceness of a bear. Berserkers worshipped the Norse god Odin, who was associated with war, wisdom, and even chaos. They believed that Odin gave them their battle frenzy, known as berserkergang. In this state, they would discard armor, bite their shields, howl like animals, and charge into battle with little care for their own safety. They seemed almost immune to pain and capable of superhuman strength, making them some of the most feared fighters of the Viking Age. Some historians think that berserkers might have used plants like henbane or mushrooms to trigger their trance-like state. These substances may have helped them enter a kind of frenzy, giving them the energy and wild aggression needed for their unusual fighting style. Although this idea is debated, it shows the lengths berserkers would go to in order to reach this intense state of mind. Over time, however, the Viking world changed. As Christianity spread and Scandinavia moved toward structured kingdoms with organized armies, the chaotic nature of berserkers no longer fit. Their uncontrollable rages sometimes caused them to harm their own allies, which led to their outlawing in certain regions by the 11th century. Leaders, such as Norwegian nobleman Jarl Eirikur Hakanarsson, officially banned berserkers, marking the decline of these wild warriors. Eventually, berserkers faded from Viking society as new values and stricter rules took hold, but their legend remains as a symbol of the fierce, untamed spirit of the Viking Age. The Viking tattoos. The idea of tattooed Vikings is both fascinating and mysterious. Unfortunately, no direct evidence of Viking tattoos has survived, as organic materials like skin degrade over time. However, ancient writings and historical accounts offer hints about their possible tattoo practices. A notable source is the 10th century Arab traveler Ahmad ibn Fadlan, who encountered a group of Rus Vikings along the Volga River. He described these people as heavily tattooed from their fingers to their necks, with designs resembling trees, serpents, and other symbolic images. Creating tattoos in Viking times would have been a challenging and painful process. The Vikings likely used simple needles made from bone or metal to puncture the skin. The ink was probably made from natural materials like soot, ash, or plant-based dyes. Without modern tools, anesthesia, or sanitation, the tattooing procedure would have been uncomfortable and time-consuming, yet highly meaningful. These tattoos were more than just body art. They held significant meaning in Viking society. They may have represented personal achievements, spiritual beliefs, or social status. For instance, a warrior might have had designs symbolizing strength or courage, while others may have displayed symbols that showed devotion to Norse gods, like Odin or Thor. Common tattoo designs probably included animals, knotwork, and mythological symbols, reflecting the Vikings' deep connection to nature and their beliefs. Some historians even believe that these tattoos were part of Viking rituals or rites of passage, marking important life events or personal milestones. Although much remains unknown, the accounts of Ibn Fadlan and Viking art provide a glimpse into a society where tattoos could have been more than decoration. They were possibly marks of identity, bravery, and belonging within their warrior culture. The ritualistic cannibalism. Cannibalism among the Vikings is a topic surrounded by mystery, fear, and limited evidence. Although not a common practice, some historical records and archaeological finds hint that it may have occurred under certain conditions. The Norse sagas, old stories that blend history and legend, mention instances of Viking warriors consuming human flesh. These acts of cannibalism were often portrayed as rituals, aimed at absorbing the power and strength of fallen enemies or instilling fear in their opponents. Archaeological evidence of cannibalism is rare but intriguing. In certain Viking burial sites, especially in the British Isles, human bones have been found with specific cut marks. These marks suggest that flesh was removed from the bones, potentially pointing to cannibalistic practices. However, interpreting this evidence remains controversial among scholars. Some experts argue that these markings could result from post-mortem rituals, where bodies were dismembered as part of specific burial customs rather than for cannibalistic consumption. There is also speculation that cannibalism might have been a response to extreme situations, like starvation. In times of severe famine or during long, difficult winters, it's possible that some Viking groups turned to cannibalism as a last resort for survival, rather than as a cultural ritual. This kind of survival cannibalism has been documented in other societies facing dire food shortages, and it's thought that Vikings may have faced similar choices in harsh conditions. While the evidence for ritualistic cannibalism in Viking culture is far from conclusive, these findings reveal an intense, complex world where survival, belief in supernatural powers, and warrior honor sometimes intersected in unsettling ways. Whether driven by ritual, necessity, or warfare psychology, the stories and evidence of Viking cannibalism add a chilling layer to our understanding of this fierce society. The human sacrifice played a significant role in Viking religious practices and beliefs. Deeply rooted in their connection with the gods, these sacrifices were part of a ritual called blot. The Vikings believed that by offering something valuable to the gods, they would earn favor and protection. While blot rituals often included sacrifices of animals, food, or treasured items, historical accounts and archaeological evidence also suggest that humans were sometimes offered, especially during times of crisis or major events. One of the most detailed accounts of Viking human sacrifices comes from Adam of Bremen, a German chronicler who described the Great Temple at Uppsala, Sweden. According to his 11th century writings, a large festival occurred every 9 years, during which 9 male members of each species, including humans, were sacrificed. These offerings were then hung in a sacred grove near the temple, and the bodies were left to decay as tributes to the gods. This gruesome spectacle was believed to maintain cosmic balance, satisfying the gods and securing prosperity and protection for the community. The purpose of human sacrifice in Viking culture was deeply connected to the Norse worldview. The Vikings believed that the gods needed blood offerings to sustain the balance between the divine and mortal worlds. This practice wasn't just an act of devotion, it was also a means of showing strength and resilience in the face of challenges. The belief was that such sacrifices could influence important aspects of life, including victory in battle, favorable weather, and abundant harvests. The blot was a religious sacrifice ritual that took place throughout the Viking world. These sacrifices were offered to the gods, usually to ensure favorable outcomes in battle, good harvests, or protection for the community. Animals such as horses, cattle, and sometimes even humans were sacrificed. The blot involved elaborate ceremonies, including feasts and the use of sacred objects. A notable example is the Grand Blot Festival at Uppsala, described by the German chronicler Adam of Bremen, where sacrifices were made every 9 years to honor the god's rites. Viking funeral practices varied, but some of the most dramatic involved ship burials. Chieftains or notable figures were often placed on a boat, surrounded by treasures and sometimes animals, before being set alight or buried. According to some accounts, the sacrifice of a slave girl or a wife was also part of the funeral, believed to ensure that the deceased would have companionship in the afterlife. Evidence of human sacrifice is also supported by discoveries at other Norse sites. Skeletal remains found in bogs and sacred areas often show signs of ritualistic treatment, which suggests that the bodies were not merely discarded, but rather prepared and placed with ritual significance. While Viking human sacrifices were rare, they were treated with intense reverence and were considered crucial acts to ensure harmony with the powerful forces that shaped their world. The Vikings' slaves. The Viking Age had a rigid social structure, with slaves, called thralls, at the lowest level. Thralls were an essential part of Viking society, often doing labor-intensive work, and in some cases, they were included in rituals, even at death. One of the most shocking accounts of slave involvement in Viking funerals comes from the 10th century Arab traveler Ahmad ibn Fadlan, who documented a ritual where a slave girl was sacrificed during a Viking chieftain's funeral. In his writings, Ibn Fadlan describes how, upon the death of a chieftain, the Vikings would place his body on a ship, along with his weapons, wealth, and sometimes animals. A slave girl, chosen to accompany the chieftain in the afterlife, was also part of this funeral arrangement. This girl was often given intoxicating drinks, likely to calm her or alter her awareness of what was to come. According to Ibn Fadlan, after being intoxicated, she was led into a tent where she endured ritual abuse by some of the chieftain's men. The final part of this ritual involved her being strangled and stabbed by a female relative of the chieftain, after which her body was placed beside him on the funeral pyre before it was set ablaze. Historians have debated whether this ritual was voluntary or forced. Ibn Fadlan's account suggests that the girl seemed to accept her fate, yet it's likely she had little choice given the cultural pressures and circumstances of the time. Some experts argue that these sacrifices were seen as a way to honor the dead, ensuring their safe journey to the afterlife, while also maintaining the Viking belief in loyal service continuing beyond death. This ritual underscores the Vikings' deep conviction in their funeral customs, where even in death, they upheld a strict hierarchy and loyalty that transcended mortal life. The Blood Eagle. The Viking blood eagle ritual is one of the most brutal execution methods described in Norse literature, known for its graphic nature and symbolic horror. Mentioned in several Norse sagas, the blood eagle was reportedly reserved for the most despised enemies, usually as a punishment or a way to make an example of them. The method of execution began with the victim's back being cut open, where the ribs were severed from the spine and spread outward. The lungs were then pulled through the openings to resemble wings, leaving the victim in excruciating pain, and, according to accounts, still alive during much of the process. These wings symbolized an eagle, a creature that represented power, spirituality, and honor in Norse culture. The blood eagle ritual may also have had a religious or sacrificial purpose. Many scholars believe it was intended to honor the Norse god Odin, the deity of war and death. By carrying out this horrific punishment, the Vikings might have thought they were giving Odin the soul of a hated enemy, earning his favor in battles. However, historical records are ambiguous, and some modern historians debate the accuracy of these accounts, speculating that the blood eagle ritual may have been exaggerated or misinterpreted over time. Despite this uncertainty, the blood eagle legend highlights the Viking culture's intensity, in which punishment could become a terrifying form of art. The Viking sagas portray them as both warriors and spiritual beings, deeply invested in their customs, even those that seem extreme to us today. Though not all Vikings practice the blood eagle ritual, its mention in Viking lore offers a glimpse into their worldview, where honor, vengeance, and spirituality were intricately connected. And there you have it, some of the most horrifying Viking traditions that still send chills down our spines. If you enjoyed learning about these brutal customs, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking history. Stay tuned for our next deep dive into the past.